I'm here today with Dr. Eric Landrum from Boise State University in Boise, Iowa. Hi, Eric. Nice to meet you. Nice to see
Good to see you, and it's great to meet you.
A pleasure to talk to you, Eric, because you have done so much work in the teaching of psychology, which transcends the teaching of psychology. And actually, a lot of the work that you've done has been used across disciplines, and it has broken into the world of faculty development. I've seen some of your work cited by people who have nothing to do with psychology, but understand good pedagogical practice. And you've been a champion for good pedagogical practice. So I really appreciate you
Great.
taking the time to talk.
Thank you.
What I want to talk a little bit about today is assessment. And the issue is that given that we have uncertainty with regard to what's happening in the fall and the rapid pivot we made in the spring, there's lots of questions about assessment. And I know you have a lot of expertise in classroom-based assessment in particular. And I just wanted to get your take on what your thoughts are with regard to if assessment's going to change or if it's going to still be a similar kind of animal despite whatever happens in the fall.
First off, thanks for asking such an important question. I think there are some nuances that have happened. First off, I'm a little bit biased here in that assessment probably is now more important than ever. It's certainly not less important. We need to continue to show that our students are learning the things that we want them to learn, both the content and acquiring the skills. Because so many faculty across the nation and really across the world had to pivot, those assessment outcomes and tracking them over time and that notion of continuous improvement are just as important now as they've ever been. Will assessment change? Our techniques might have to adapt. If you were doing assessment processes in your face-to-face classroom and you're no longer doing that, maybe you've turned your course into a hybrid for the fall or a high flex course, you may have to adapt and change, but the issue of the importance of assessment, I don't think has changed unless it's become more important. And the one thing I've been talking to faculty members about, for example, in March and April, there were about 4,000 universities in the nation who all became online institutions. So if we want to show that we're doing a good job, really the way to do that is through assessment data. How are we doing a good job compared to 4,000 other institutions? If students in the fall, as some of the trends are telling us, students are not going to go back to their distant institutions, but they're going to stay close to home. And especially where you are on the East Coast, they've got a lot of choices. So how are we going to differentiate? Well, showing good assessment data with outcomes year over year, showing the success of our graduates and our alumni, those assessment data become really super important.
Thanks for that. I really appreciate that comment because I think that one of the things that I've tried to convey to my faculty is the idea that we ask students for work that is supposed to demonstrate how effectively the students have mastered the content or managed the learning objectives of our particular course. And we're giving them that feedback that we want them to know, which helps them understand how well they've done. Well, I think as an institution in general, I think what you're saying is important too, is we want to be able to articulate both to our students, but then outside that we are meeting our learning objectives and here's the data to support it. So the feedback to the students helps the students, but their work to us actually gives us feedback on how effectively we're helping them get to where they are. That feedback loop between the two pieces, I think, really helps articulate why we are valuable in this educational experience. Because what you said, I think, is really important about the Northeast. It's become very, very apparent that the Northeast is overcrowded with institutions. And what we're seeing right now are institutions closing. In New England alone, I believe we've had 6 or 7 institutions in the last 3 years go under. And literally dozens are on the brink right now because of the financial hit they took with the pandemic. And then there are institutions that are doing things that are creating more competition. I'm not sure if it's made it out your way, but the Southern New Hampshire University, which is a big competitor for us out here,
Right.
is offering free tuition for first-year students. And then they're capping their tuition at $10,000. And so what I believe our assessment does is it provides our students with the idea that if they're paying what they're paying to come to Springfield College, we're going to give them this opportunity to learn, we're going to give them the feedback, and we are accountable as well to, if we're not doing the job we need to do, we can go back and really work with students to make sure they're meeting the objectives.
I think faculty members sometimes cringe at thinking about it like this way, but we have to think about the value added that we do for our students. I mean, places like a Southern New Hampshire, places like a University of Phoenix, places like a Walden, they do online instruction for a living. That's their bread and butter.
Yep.
And quite honestly, they get quite good at it. They are accredited. There are accredited online doctoral programs. There are APA accredited online doctoral programs. And I know we're not just talking about psychology right now. If we, a Boise State and a Springfield College, if we're going to enter that sphere, assessment data gives us, a way to document that we belong in that sphere, even if we're going to be there temporarily before we go back to the old normal. My dean, who I respect and admire greatly, she has been very clear in telling us anyone who thinks that fall of 20 is going to look like fall of 19 is sadly mistaken.
Yeah.
It's going to take a few fall cycles for us to get back to what fall of 19 ever looked at. And so, you talked about this loop between students and faculty. I think there's one more loop in there, an additional loop that we could talk about. I think the faculty who are savvy, who are also thinking about, they know what their students do once they graduate. And it's beyond just those students who go on to graduate school, professional school. They know where they go for employment, that first job outside the baccalaureate degree. And so they connect the things they do at the first job with the types of assignments they do in their junior and their senior and their capstone classes. If we want to give our students a gift of being prepared for that launch, that transition from college to career, we give them the skill set and the confidence in those upper division classes to be successful. And we know we are because we have the assessment data. And now we can go to employers and say, look what we're doing to get your future employees ready. I don't think that's sinful for us to get our students to have a competitive advantage once they launch. I know some faculty members cringe at that because they don't think that we should be a vocational institution. And I know that you have young adult children and I have young adult children, and we want our kids to be able to get jobs.
Indeed. And I think that piece right there, I think, is the one that many institutions, you get not only that opinion from some schools within the school. So we have a PT and an OT and a PA, which,
Yes.
And by the way, so PT, OT, PA, we're at like 100% employment when they walk out the door. So that creates tension with the other schools. In my mind, what it ought to do is really help promote them. Okay, so we want these transferable skills that are going to help our students. We need to make sure that we're doing it well. And I think that's a great point, and one that our faculty really do need to hear. So
yeah, and faculty have to have the bandwidth, and department chairs, deans have to give a little bit of space for the faculty to go out in the community and make those connections. And sometimes service learning is a way to do that.
Mhm.
Business schools are really good about this. Business schools are really good about having local business people on their advisory boards and bringing them to campus and helping them be part of assessment centers. But I haven't seen as many good examples in the social sciences, in the physical sciences, even in the humanities. But business schools are really good at this.
Our institution's interesting in that we've been identified as a sort of a key player in the greater Springfield community, the economic development for many years. But it doesn't mean that we don't need to continue to improve that. We've been around for well over 100 years. We have lots of connections in the community, but we also underwent this massive retirement over the last 3 years. We've lost a third of our full-time faculty through retirements.
Wow.
And so with that, we need to continue to work on those issues. So I think it all sort of wraps into this idea that we need to continue to pay attention to this feedback and provide our students with good assessments so they know where they're going, and we can pay attention and be able to do the right things to help our students. And I say this all the time. It is our moral and ethical obligation to do the best job for our students. And by knowing how well they're doing and how much they're making progress towards our learning objectives, we then can do the kinds of things to really make sure they're doing all that they can.
Well, and if we're doing meaningful assessment, faculty have to trust the systems in place, because really meaningful assessment, there's actually people who disagree with me on this, and that's fine. Meaningful assessment isn't about assessing student performance. When we assess student performance, I personally call that grading.
Mm-hmm.
Grading is about giving students feedback about their performance. Assessment to me is giving feedback about my performance. And so if we're doing meaningful assessment, that means that I might get feedback where I need to improve. And so to do that means I have to be willing to accept that I might get negative feedback, which
Hmm.
means that places like teaching and learning centers need to be places where we uplift faculty, not where we send faculty for punishments
Uh-huh.
because they've gotten low scores or because they're at risk of not being promoted with tenure. And so that's why it's so refreshing to see centers for teaching and learning around the country. That's why folks like you, Chris, really became heroes in the pandemic and in the pivot. No, seriously, because you had to become one of the most popular people on your campus. And our colleagues like Liz Hammer, like Regan Gorung, all the folks who I know who are psychologists by trade and now teaching and learning directors around the country. And it makes perfect sense. The training in psychology inherently gets you ready to be a teacher, understanding, learning, memory, cognition, all that good stuff.
Thanks a lot, Eric, for your comments and for your time. I really appreciate it, and good to see you.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Chris.